So my daughter has effectively uninvited me to the wedding I paid for and invited the guy my cheating ex-wife left me for. In retaliation, I figured I'd just back away and watch the train wreck unfold without my support. I'm a 57-year-old man and never thought I'd be sharing this story, but the burden of emotion has been too much over these weeks. Frankly, I don't know where to find any kind of comfort. Let us be clear for a moment. This is about my 27-year-old daughter, Kay. She has really hurt my feelings, and I've made a decision that I'm still wrestling through. For perspective, Kay is my only child from my first marriage. Abandoned by her mother at the age of 7 for a man called Tom, who had taken up with Kay's mother and run off to Europe. I brought up Kay alone for 5 years before I married my current wife, Jenna, 45. Sure, those years were rough, juggling single motherhood with business ownership, but those years for Kay were hard in another way too, as she grappled with the emotional baggage created when her mother abandoned them. Kay got engaged to a man named Ben about 2 months ago. Our marriage has been rough for years. I mean, the stuff will floor you. But when she told me she was getting married, I was actually happy for her. Finally, something good, something worth having, was going right. She seemed excited about Ben, and I allowed myself to think for once that she might actually be on the mend. They were a struggling young couple. They'd just recently gotten honest jobs, and they were broke, so they could only do a courthouse wedding. Like any doting Papa Bear, I pledged to pay for the entire thing as our wedding gift, Yim-dash, space, food, flowers, music, Yim-dash, the whole shebang to the sum of about $50,000. My export family business is booming over the generations. I can afford the generosity. I remember meeting about the wedding plans. For the first time in ages, Kay actually got excited, sending me Pinterest boards and Instagrams she'd seen and loved. I was starting to feel like we were finally on our way into the father-daughter relationship I had pined for. She chose an event planner who was used to planning high-end events, and I let her lead, as though it was her day as I worked through. I'd later tell her how proud of her I was for selecting the beautiful lakeside setting where I would one day walk her down the aisle. She sent me a thumbs-up emoji in reply, and in hindsight, I probably had an inkling that something was not quite right. For 6 weeks or so, things ticked along nicely as Kay dealt with the preparations and I worked on the escalating costs. But a few red flags went up. One of Jenna's cousins had heard from one of Kay's friends that Kay had to cut out toxic family members for her mental health, she said. I shrugged it off as a misunderstanding, but I had a lesson to learn the hard way. It all started to unravel when my brother Joe asked about the wedding date, as he needed to book flights. I called the wedding planner to put him on the guest list, expecting an easy update. Much to my surprise, he paused and informed me that the list was full and any additions would need to be cleared by the bride. I was puzzled. I am the one footing the bill here, and yet I was being treated as if I had no say. When I asked for the guest list, the planner fumbled, told me he couldn't share it, and tried to get off the phone. I am frustrated at being in an extremely painful position that I now experience on a daily basis in the public. I am a 57-year-old father dealing with the heartbreaking behavior of my one child, Kay, who is 27. I feel that I have been betrayed and don't know how to feel about it, especially with her wedding coming up. For some context, Kay is my daughter from my first marriage. Her mother abandoned us when Kay was 7 and went to live a different life in Europe with a man named Tom. I raised Kay by myself for 5 years, working as a single parent through entrepreneurship. It was a tough time. Kay was overwhelmed by the abandonment of her mother. Then fast forward 2 months ago when Kay posted she and a guy named Ben were engaged. But I was also genuinely happy for her, despite any previous strife. It seemed like she was finally making it, even if she and Ben were strapped for cash and had a courthouse wedding. Realizing their plight, I offered to pay for a whole wedding, a present worth some $50,000. My family has been in export business for generations, and this means made my gesture possible. Because when we first discussed our plans, I saw a side of Kay that I hadn't seen in years. She was alive with excitement. I finally felt like we were on the brink of a father-daughter reconnection. I watched her as she talked to the wedding planner and picked out everything from the site to the decorations. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud to be part of this moment in her life. But I started to feel a bit weird when I started noticing little things, such as a friend of Kay's was saying something about how she was cutting out toxic family members out of her life for her mental health. It started to spiral when my brother Joe called asking for the wedding date to plan his trip. I contacted the organizer in order to put him on the guest list, but what I did not expect was resistance to the idea. He explained that the guest list was oversubscribed and he would have to check with Kay if anyone could be added. I was bewildered and angry, demanding to see the list and realizing that neither my name nor Jenna's, the person that has been a constant alongside me and a loving presence in Kay's life, appeared on it. But this father of the bride was listed as Tom, the man who had abandoned me and Kay years before. It was clear that it was not just a mistake, but a deliberate erasing action. Kay had been spinning to friends and family the story of how I was an emotionally abusive and neglectful father, framing the ground for her to justify cutting me out of her life. I was in shock that this betrayal had come from someone who I had literally dedicated my life to supporting. After that, I fell into a deep, dark pit, drinking myself to the oblivion that I hoped would at least help process the depths of the betrayal. I tried calling Kay many times, but the phone was not being picked up. I felt myself spiraling, thinking of all the years of challenges we had been through together and how hard I had loved her. It hurt to know that I'd watched Jenna, who was my rock as well as Kay's, derided and set up at the hands of the woman she was beginning to love. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I continued to get bills and check-ins from the planner, a cruel reminder of the money I had invested in an event I had no right to attend. Kay, meanwhile, looked like she was relishing in her plans, even putting up photographs from her bachelorette party, seemingly unperturbed by the havoc she had wreaked in our lives. After a week of madness, I decided to drag Kay out into the open. I could not allow myself to agree with her, for although Jenna had her fears and worries, I could not imagine her resisting the need she was trying to deny. Filled with dread and resolve, I drove to her apartment. The tension was thick in the air as I walked in and ever so dismissive Kay's reaction. I questioned why she wanted Tom, not me, to walk her down the aisle, and she just smirked and also said stuff about boundaries and how I was in control of her life. Nad, how dare I? During our conversation, I realized that she had portrayed me as an abusive father to Ben, who accepted her version of everything. For her to have been in contact with Tom, who had broken her heart, was a knife through mine. Years of love and help meant nothing in her eyes when she finally saw us only as financial gain. There had been a short, painful exchange, and then I stormed out of Kay's apartment in despair. The sting of her betrayal was burdening my heart. I could hardly catch my breath as I drove home, my heart breaking that the daughter I fought so hard for chose to honor the very man who had neglected her. In the days that followed, I tried to contact Kay, mad for an explanation of what I had done to deserve that treatment. Instead, all I got back was anger, where you said, yada, yada, yada. There can be no worse father in this world for just trying to be there for you during a crisis. This experience has broken me in ways I never would have dreamed of experiencing, as I reel from having a daughter who appears to have turned her back on her own father. I have no reason to have been in this emotional place of betrayal and abandonment. It was not what I planned for, and now I am facing a fork in the road and wishing quite desperately that I could just have something untangle here. I was a single parent for 5 years after the mother of my daughter, Kay, left, while also running a business and attempting to handle my daughter's increasingly challenging behavior. At that time, Jenna came into our lives and has been a rock for Kay, above and beyond. When Kay was caught with pills in high school, Jenna found her a counselor. After Kay's grades began to drop, Jenna had spent countless hours helping her with schoolwork. But Kay see Jenna as a gold-digging bitch that stole her father. Kay mentions an incident that occurred while she was living with my sister a lot. After a few difficult moments, I thought a change of setting might do Kay well, and that my sister also has a daughter around the same age that Kay could bond with. Unfortunately, my plan started to backfire on me when Kay started bullying my niece and making her life a living hell. When I called Kay out on her behavior, she expected me to support her and was pissed off that I wouldn't. She blamed me for putting others ahead of her, conveniently forgetting when she rallied for her readmission from her drug bust, or when she expected me to utilize my professional contacts to get her into college after she received shitty grades. The cost of supporting Kay has been tremendous. I paid for her rehab twice, maxed out credit cards, and taken on loans to ease her through the hard times. She lived with us for multiple years rent-free, and I was responsible for her car, phone, and more. Even though we had many heated arguments and I felt that she treated Jenna like dirt, I supported her because that's what a father does. But yesterday, she had the guts to say I owed her a lavish wedding, that I at least owed her that after I had ruined her life with a second marriage. When I told her how much I had put into this wedding, $50,000, she went on the defensive, saying that any good father would want to provide his daughter with the wedding of her dreams. I lost my temper and told her she acted entitled and ungrateful, which backfired as she came back with a list of everything I had ever done wrong in her eyes. The talk turned ugly after she said I'd left her while I was on business trips that paid for her fancy home, which belonged to the bank, by the way, and accused me of valuing Jenna more than her. She even said how she wished her mother had taken her to Europe in place of leaving her to me. It was at that point that I, at least for the previous 20 years, felt that everything that a father strives for was nothing to her, and that she would rather be with those who have deserted her. I was completely crushed after that call. She found me crying in my office for the first time, seeing me in a far-from-prefect state. Jenna, much too meek, suddenly exploded in one mighty placid and said, "Well, you to mind your own business and stop minding everybody else's," and even Jenna did the other lassies as they sat there looking scared stiff. "We have to protect ourselves," she said, and added that Kay had to understand that actions had consequences. A teacher who specializes in children with challenges, Jenna saw in Kay's actions classic narcissistic entitlement. Yet I found myself looking at the growing stack of receipts for wedding expenses on my desk, one for our deposit on the venue, another for catering, flowers, entertainment. All for a season in my life where I did not feel welcomed. Processing pain and anger, I made a snap decision to cancel everything. I called the bank to stop payments first thing in the morning, only to find that most of the deposits were not refundable. I didn't give a damn about the money. I only wanted to stop this wedding from taking place. I was able to cancel it and then cancel the catering and flowers and everything, but I had to keep the wedding planner so she wouldn't find out. It was a small vengeance, but I was filled with pain and rage. When I canceled the plans, it was with a high school graduation photo of Kay in which she was actually smiling. For an instant, I had half a mind. Then I thought of the way she had laughed at me concerning Tom and of the cruel things about Jenna's name that she had said. I was a bit more adamant in my cancellations. It was a dress she genuinely wanted, and I didn't tamper with that. As I moved through the pain of canceling, an onslaught of automated emails written in the giddy, disjointed language of the wedding planner I had paid to keep things together arrived, delivering me updates on deadlines and final decisions, each feeling like a hard jab into an already swollen heart. Jenna sat next to me, comforting me through the calls, even stepping in when I was too filled with emotion to talk. Through the whole thing, I kept wondering how Kay would respond when he found out what I had done. Part of me wanted to see her feel the pain which was consuming me, but part of me was simply worn out. Worn out from being the bad guy in her story. This wedding was not the most expensive thing I had ever financed for Kay, but it was the most fundamentally weird. It wasn't about helping her through a crisis. It was her using me while trying to do some damage. After all was said and done, I returned to my office, struggling to accept the fact that I had destroyed my own daughter's wedding. I didn't pick up the phone when the wedding planner called. I let it go to voicemail. I knew he'd soon put two and two together when no guests showed up at the venue. The day of the wedding seemed to proceed as any other simple wedding. Jenna and I both tried to keep it. I am sorry. And here, just a professionally formatted and well-paraphrased version of the original text. It conveys the meaning, though clarity and cohesion were improved. It's amazing to realize that I waited for 5 years after my ex-wife skipped town before I even considered dating again. Those 5 years were years of being a single father, running a business, surviving the challenges of trying to raise a child who began to overtax my patience. Jenna has been so incredibly nice and supportive to Kay this entire time, going beyond the call of duty. Like when Kay got busted for pills in high school, which was a huge incident, Jenna was the person who found her a counselor. And then Jenna tutoring Kay, who needed it academically. Kay has named Jenna a gold digger who stole me away from her despite her being a lowly limey. Courtney mentions an incident from when she lived with my sister all the time. After we fell on hard times, I figured my sister, who has a daughter of the same age, would be a better environment for Kay, so I sent her to live with her. Unfortunately, it blew up on my in-laws, because Kay started bullying my niece and making her life a living hell. When I confronted Kay, I was supposed to stand by her and was treated very rudely when I did not support her. Yesterday, she accused me of having put other people in front of her, all the while ignoring the countless moments when I did put her first, even after all she did, after she put my job as risk with the pill bullshit. I cashed in all of my chits during that crisis. When her marks took a dip and she was in danger of having to compromise on a mediocre college, I played my business connections to get her a toehold somewhere decent. Monetarily, I have been very generous to her. Do you know how expensive rehab is? Because I do. Twice. The first was in her post-college years, when she relapsed into drugs, and the second was a year later. I gave up everything to be there for her, stupid amounts of credit card debt and loans, just so she had what she needs. She lived with us until last year, and never paid a dime. I paid her car payments, her phone, her credit cards, everything. In spite of all the drama, all the yelling, and the late-night calls begging for help, I stayed with her because that's what dads do, isn't it? Yesterday, however, she had the nerve to ask me to pay for her wedding, saying I now owed her after ruining her life when I remarried. When I pointed out that I did her a favor by paying for a $50,000 wedding, she got defensive and said that any decent father would want to make their daughter's dream wedding a reality. I lost my patience and called her entitled and ungrateful. And that, naturally, took her down a list of every outrageous thing I'd ever done in her eyes, the way she used to say how I left her when I went on business trips that paid for the lifestyle she apparently deserved. She claimed I'd picked Jenna over her, especially after spewing racist names and accusations at Jenna, who is Middle Eastern. The last straw was that she wished her mother had taken her to Europe and not left her with me. In that second, I knew that 2 decades of busting my ass trying to be an amazing father meant nothing to her, and that she was doing what she wanted to do because they wanted to be with the losers who betrayed them. I mean, I was devastated after that call. I was in my office, crying, and Jenna had never seen me like that before. Jenna, as usual, wordlessly sat next to me and waited. Finally, Jenna lost her shit. Not at me, but the circumstances. I'd never seen her truly angry in 14 years of marriage. She said we needed to look after ourselves, and Kay had to accept that what she was doing was beyond belief. As a teacher of troubled kids, Jenna said that Kay's move was a classic example of narcissistic entitlement. An increasingly stubborn reality was sitting right there atop my desk. The growing pile of wedding bills for the deposit on the venue, $15,000, and catering, $8,000, and flowers, $5,000, and a DJ, $3,000, each a grim, flopping iceberg in the water warning me that I was about to hit something big. The thought of me paying for a wedding that I wouldn't even be invited to, as my daughter pranced around with Tom, doing her best impression of one big, happy family, was too much. The following morning, I contacted my bank to stop payments, though most of the deposits were non-refundable. I didn't want the money, I just wanted to prevent him from getting married. I went first to the venue, told the story to them. To my surprise, they were sympathetic and bared their souls about family schisms. I called off the caterer, the flowers, the DJ, and the photographer, still somehow managing to leave the wedding planner in place in order to prevent Kay from making fresh plans. Petty, maybe, but hurt and anger warp your thinking. In that moment of cancellation, I almost changed my mind after coming across a photo Kay had taken at her high school graduation receiving her diploma. Kay was giving a smile which was very real, the smile that I never really saw anymore as she had in other photos at that time. One of the last times I can ever remember that she was happy. Then I thought about the smarminess of the things she said about Tom, and what a jerk she had been to Jenna, and I didn't care anymore. The dress was paid for and at her place, so I dropped that. It was the one part of the wedding that she really enjoyed, the one thing she had fun picking out with her friends. But what was killing me was the automated emails from the wedding planner regarding upcoming deadlines for final menu selections, the father-daughter dance song, and so on. And each one was like a dagger in my heart. Jenna stayed by my side, even answering a few calls when I found myself too emotional to talk. I thought about how this would affect Kay, how much patching and mending would have to happen, and part of me hoped Kay would feel the amount of hurt I felt, but in general, I just felt tired. Tired of always being the bad one in her story, no matter what I tried to do. But this wasn't even the most expensive thing I ever bankrolled for Kay. Her 2 trips to rehab had been more. But this felt different. This was her using me while attempting actively to hurt me. When everything was canceled, I sat in my office, eyes on the wall. There was nothing to say to Jenna. We sat in silence as I reflected on how I had ended up there, ruining my own daughter's wedding. The wedding planner was still calling, demanding final decisions, but I let her messages go to voicemail, confident that she would be clued into the ruse when no one showed up at the venue. I should, in part, have expected the brawl which would follow on the day of their wedding, but I no longer thought of that. The day of the wedding was like any other Saturday. Jenna and I spent the day at home, trying to go about our business as usual while constantly looking at our phones. It was around 10 a.m. when my niece started texting me. It emerged that the wedding planner and his team had turned up at the venue, but when they showed the paperwork, security had refused to let them in. The planner was desperate to contact Kay and me, but I didn't respond. She turned up about 11 in the morning, already in the wedding dress, and looking good, which just made things worse. Upon being told by security that she couldn't see her favorite husband no more, she flipped, hollering at the guards and claiming some mistake must have been made. They had to get a grip on her to keep her from sprinting past them. My niece later reported that Kay had yelled, "Do you know who my father is?" Which was rich, considering she had previously told me she didn't want me at the wedding. To add to the insult, Tom never turned up at all, leaving Kay to her own devices. It all went further off the rails with the arrival of Ben, her fiancé. As Kay tried to jump a fence to get into the venue, it got covered in mud. Ben was trying to save her from possibly being arrested for trespassing as the wedding planner talked to his boss, unfurled. By then, the guests, a couple hundred, were starting to show up, confused and unaware of what was going on, as cars lined the street. The catering trucks showed up, too late to get the cancellation notice, blocking traffic as they did. It was only in the midst of these news events that Kay finally came to terms with the realization. My niece says there was an immediate hush of deathly silence, then giggling madness, although she would later tell of a woman that, penetrating the silence with insane laughter, proclaimed, "It was my daddy that did this. He ruined everything." She never stopped trying to call me, threatening me, Jenna, and even our house with violence. I have terrible, creepy voicemails of her where she's more and more out of her mind, threatening us with really violent things. At around 1 p.m., she made her way to our place in her wedding dress, which, as expected, was now a complete disaster, her makeup running in long streaks down her cheeks. But she could not get in, because I had disabled her entry code. No, she didn't go into the store and look for me. She just laid on her car horn for 10 solid minutes until a neighbor called the cops. When the cops got there, they found her outside, hurling stones at our security cameras, screaming about how I had destroyed her life. She had to be manhandled away by police, as Ben looked embarrassed. I saw the whole thing on our security footage. Jenna wanted us to turn away, but I couldn't look away. This was my daughter, having a total meltdown in a dirty party dress. My worst day ever. I'd wanted to teach her a lesson, but that was excruciating to watch, to see her unravel like that. Then the wedding planner called about the final payments, and I said he needed to talk to Kay. He briefly moaned about his reputation being sullied. Then I clicked off, by then not remotely giving a shit. I did find out, after the fact, that some of the guests had converged on Kay and Ben's apartment for an impromptu reception involving grocery store cake. A very sad state of affairs. The days after the wedding were uncomfortable. 3 hours later, my parents pulled up to our house the next morning. My mother was angry, scolding me for ruining my daughter's wedding, and that family is what we have, and we should never turn them away. My father looked glum, and his disappointment was a burden upon him. I tried to defend my standpoint, but my mother wasn't hearing it, insisting Kay just needed clarity and that I had to take the high road. Then the bombshell. They offered to fund an entirely new wedding, undercutting the decisions I had made. The betrayal cut deeply, and Kay's response was even worse. When my parents told her of their plan, she exploded, said they had taken my side over her and turned on her, blamed them for her struggles with drugs. She yelled at my mom, who has a heart condition and is elderly, to get the fuck out of her life forever. That was when my parents finally realized just how much I was dealing with when it came to Kay's behavior. Later that night, my mother phoned crying, apologizing for not believing me and wondering where Kay's aggression had come from. After this outburst, the family started to split into factions. My sister, who'd seen Kay's misbehavior and supported me fully, and my brother Joe thought I'd stepped the line and stirred a family feud. Thanksgiving would surely be tense this year. Despite trying to stay neutral, the family of Jenna had had enough and made no secret of their dislike for Kay. Friends were also split, with some doubting my sanity. I was quietly kicked off the country club board, ruining your daughter's wedding not being much of a hero story after all. Kay started making up lies about me, saying I did what I did out of racism toward Ben's family, though clearly that wasn't the case as Jenna's family is of Middle Eastern descent. This negative rhetoric made its way into my professional life as well. I lost contracts, my secretary quit, my reputation was in the gutter. The whole thing was so absurd that my stomach was eaten with the surreality of the situation as I tossed and turned the entire night in the grip of guilt. I would often wonder if I was being too stubborn, and should I have just paid for the wedding to prevent conflict? But in considering the way she had treated my parents, who had only ever shown her love, I felt my guilt vanish. Jenna has been my rock through the entire thing. She caught me at it the other night, looking at old baby photographs of Kay. She would sit quietly beside me in the pain. She had no need to speak. I recently discovered through my niece's Instagram, the one Kay allows her to have, that Kay and Ben had a small wedding, only a month after the mess I splashed everywhere, Just 20 of their friends at a backyard BBQ, no Tom in sight. Things got a little back to life. Jenna and I attempted to progress. I ceased dwelling on the matter and began to be okay with everything. Then suddenly last week a call came through to my number unknown. It was Ben. My heart sank, thinking something bad was happening to Kay. That surprised me. Ben wanted to go for dinner, but wouldn't say why over the phone. I ought to have refused him, but I was tempted by curiosity to comply. Jenna was upset, but accepted my choice. They had separated 3 months before I found out at the meeting. Kay had been physically abusing him with her outbursts, throwing dishes, breaking his things, screaming at him. This record of conduct had become all too familiar. Ben described how shortly after moving for his job, Kay began working herself up by fighting with paranoia about feeling outcast and convinced that everybody hated her. But he also lamented how he had allowed himself to be manipulated by Kay before the wedding. "I should have seen the red flags," he said with a sigh, explaining how she had initially overwhelmed him with affection before she showed her true face. He told Ben that Kay had even blown up when he had suggested that his sister be invited to their small wedding. "You want your sister to be at our wedding?" Kay had screamed, accusing Ben of trying to be in control of all this just like Jenna. He asked if I could help him help Kay get into therapy and tell her a little of what he had said to me because she had been spiraling since their breakup and blowing his phone up with calls and texts. Though he had some feelings for her, he would take no abuse. Part of me just wanted to say, "Welcome to the last 20 years of my life." But the sight of him in such distress brought me back to my own formative years. So I decided to visit Kay. Jenna told me I shouldn't go alone. She was concerned for my safety. But I felt like I had to face her and didn't want to involve Jenna in the drama. Everything was very untidy in Kay's apartment when I walked in. The second she saw me, she went off on me, calling me names and telling me that I was reason her life was shit. That she knew Ben didn't want to leave me, but I am such a psycho that he had to go. I tried to stay calm and urged her to ask for help, but she laughed, then said something that gave me the chills. "I wish I could kill Jenna." The look in her eyes was chilling, and I quickly left. When I got in my car, I called Ben and let him know I had tried Kay, but thought she was too far gone for me to be of any help. Yet I could not give up entirely. I reached out to Kay's old best friend from high school and asked if she would get in touch with Kay and let her know that she, her best friend, urged Kay to get herself into therapy. To my surprise, it worked. Kay acquiesced to start therapy and even apologized to my parents, but she maintained that she could never forgive me or Jenna. I have no idea what the future looks like. The daughter I pulled up is still in Kay, buried under the dirt of frustration and resentment, but I'm not the one anymore who can lift her out. I had to learn that, the hard way. I also do not wish to post this, but feel the need to share the truth. Thank you for the support over the last year, to the other parents especially, who shared their stories, which has helped me feel less isolated. The conclusion I drew from this is that there may be times when you have to let someone go, even when you love them so much. It's a painful lesson, but one I guess I'm going to have to learn.